Hello and welcome to the Emma's for Mama podcast. I'm your host, Abby Halverstadt, happy wife, mama to 10, Bible-believing Christian. And on today's show, we're going to dive into the wild, wonderful world of boys. I get tons of DMs asking for help with channeling boy energy, with connecting with older boys. And our guest today, Rebecca Lovell, is going to help us do just that. Before we dive in, I want to highlight our podcast sponsor, Tighten Your Tinkler. With such a great name, you know that they must be offering a great option for helping to restore your pelvic floor if you're a mom and the thought of laughing and not peeing, or running and not peeing, or not living in constant pain is foreign to you. I want to tell you there is hope, and that Tighten Your Tinkler has a wonderful program. You can take their little 5-minute quiz to learn how to help your pelvic floor improve in just 10 minutes a day without Kegels or devices or surgery. If that sounds like something you could use the code MAMA50 for $50 off their enrollment at tightenyourtinkler.com. I also want to mention our podcast sponsor, Voetberg Music Academy, which is celebrating their 10-year anniversary and celebrating with you by offering you your first month with them for just $10. You can use the code MSForMama10 to get that deal. And the wonderful news is that you can share lessons between siblings. So even though each month after is $37 and that's all per month, you can share those lessons between siblings in guitar, fiddle, mandolin, ukulele, and piano, and they can participate in the 6 Songs of Summer Challenge, which sounds like so much fun. You can learn a song each week. They have options for beginner and advanced. You can get live coaching calls, weekly videos, challenges like that 6 Songs of Summer Challenge, and so much more for that low, low price. Make sure to use the code MSForMama10 at checkout at VoetbergMusicAcademy.com. Okay, friends, I have a guest on today whose message I absolutely love as a mother of 7 boys. Rebecca Lovell is on today to talk about all things boy masculinity, the way our culture views males in general, and whether or not that lines up with scripture. And I am excited for this conversation. Rebecca, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, looking forward to it.
So give us your background. Tell us kind of why this is a passion of yours. You actually have a book that you've written called Boyhood, Resurrected. And I think it's going to be a great resource for my audience because I get asked about boys so much more than I get asked about girls. Have you found that
Really?
to be true as well?
Yeah, moms typically seem to cry out, "Help, is this normal?" Yes, it is. He's a boy. It's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So give us your background.
So, mom of 2 boys, they're 12 and 13 now. Been married 20 years this year. And I've homeschooled since my oldest. We pulled him out of public school speech therapy in pre-K. So, the brush with public education there, how he was treated, and then just even dropping my son off at church nursery, or just my friends kind of looking at me like they felt sorry for me when my boys are wild and rough and tumble while maybe their girls are doing tea parties, playing with dolls. I started to see there's this idea that boys are a burden. But I knew that God had designed them for that wild energy for a good reason. You know, they're one day going to be protectors, providers, leaders, and lovers of their own family. And so within bounds, good boundaries of respect and discipline, boys need to run wild, get their energy out, explore, build, conquer, create, especially when they're young, so that they can be the men God has called them to be.
And I agree with every word you just said. And I suppose we could just put a pin in that and call that the podcast, but we're going to dive into it.
Good.
Because, you know, I hear girl moms that reach out too. And I think if I were to put my finger on one thing, it would be that I probably get more questions about boys because we are not boys. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if
Sure.
my audience is moms and they're
Yeah.
having sons, they're not necessarily immediately relating to that behavior because God made them male and female in the image of God. He created them, and we express different facets of the Imago Dei with our gender, with the sex
Absolutely.
that God gave us.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's probably just the most obvious explanation. But
Mm-hmm.
I do know that historically, girls have been considered a burden to society.
Sure.
And I also know that I hear moms who get a lot of kind of sympathetic glances and condolence comments when they find out they only have girls. They're so
Mm,
expensive. They're so histrionic, all of those
mm,
things. So we could have that conversation
yes.
too, and I may. So if it's somebody that's a girl mom that's like, no, boys are not the ones singled out, hang in there with us because this is our topic for today. But I think we could totally address the feminine aspect as well. But what I just said, historically, girls have been considered a burden, but I agree that now it has switched to
Mhm,
being like, oh, you had a boy? I'm so sorry. Like,
mhm.
why do you think that shift has happened?
Well, I think that our culture is labeling it toxic masculinity. Feminism is just running rampant. Family values, just being married, having kids, raising your own kids at home is really looked down upon and judged. And I think it was with good intentions that the generation before us wanted us to have workforce skills, and that's not wrong. I was raised to be a career woman, but with that comes this idea that we've got to produce. We've got to set out and conquer. And as women, I think we actually need to nurture more. And so when that is focused on a boy in classrooms, they can't sit still all day. They're climbing the walls, sometimes literally. And, then it's seen
Yeah.
that boyhood is medicated. Even young boys are giving medications because of the system, but the system is broken when boys aren't surviving in it. It's not the boy that's broken. We've just gotten so far away from an active hands-on education, especially for our boys. So if they can't sit still for hours and do work, and not that girls need to either, but girls seem to be able to handle it better, then you have the
Sure.
problem child. Then you have the kid who's always wiggling and bouncing and, is jumping on other kids with a foam sword and wants to wrestle. And it's not necessarily that he's wrong or bad, he's just being a boy.
Okay, so let's tackle that topic first
Mhm.
because obviously we can have certain things we excuse about ourselves because there is a natural tendency, but sometimes it's a sinful tendency.
Sure.
Boyish tendencies are not sinful, but one of the big questions I get asked from moms is, to what extent do I allow this? Obviously, the answer is going to vary per family.
Hmm.
But if you were to talk to a wide range of moms and a wide range of their boys' personalities, because of course there's going to be the mom that's listening that's like, mine loves to sit in a corner and read.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't attack anybody with, because so obviously there's different facets. What advice would you give to the mom who's trying to figure out where to draw the line? Not stifle her children's boyhood, but also not have hellions that make everybody's lives hard.
Absolutely. Yeah. So GK Chesterton talks about we need room for good things to run wild, but it's a time and place for that room. So, they're going to sit and be respectful during church or any formal setting, or like my husband, when he reads aloud, he likes the boys to sit. When I read aloud, I let the boys bounce a little. It is distracting though. So it's training them like, all right, buddy, we're going to sit here for an hour and then we're just going to go out. We're going to have recess. We're going to climb a tree, bounce a ball, ride your bike, just whatever. It's training them that you have to be respectful and disciplined at certain times, but then there's other times you can let loose. And then the wrestling thing, yeah, I think boys are always wanting to test themselves, measure themselves. They're testing their strength. John Eldridge marks that especially. And I think a boy who's never allowed to wrestle or test his physical strength in all those ways, climbing high trees, things like that, he's really missing out. Even if he does prefer just reading in the corner, I have a heavy reader too, and that's a very good thing. But boys need to let that physical side, yeah, see how far they can go in some areas to push the limits. It's good for them, especially as they're becoming young men.
Well, and I would insert that as we see almost this dichotomy of people saying toxic masculinity when you see the more boyish traits coming out in men or the more masculine traits presenting,
Mm-hmm.
but then also women complaining about lack of initiative,
Mm-hmm.
lack of effort, lack of making the first step. Let's say, for example, in the dating scene,
Uh-huh.
I feel like you're not being intellectually honest about the connection between the two.
Mhm.
Do you agree?
Well, we want men to be leaders, but yeah, when they're raised and they're kind of put in a box and they're told to sit down and be quiet, then they're not going to know when it's appropriate to step up and be a leader. And that's something that can be tricky as a parent, but you decide between you and your husband, and his role as dad is huge. And if you're a single mom, you don't have dad in your son's life, maybe there's grandpa and uncle, a trusted coach or advisor or teacher, but there's going to need to be a good, trusted male in authority and good leadership over this man, so that your young man, that he learns how to become a leader and speak out and step up when necessary, when it's appropriate, and that he's encouraged to do so, and that he's given permission to do so. We don't want to raise, dare I say, beta males who are bossed around by the women in their lives.
Yeah. And I feel like when we have those boundary conversations really early, this is an appropriate time to do this.
Mhm.
Or, um, like, for example, in our house with all of the wrestling. So I have two boys that are my two oldest. They're 19 and 18.
Awesome.
And then I have five boys in a row from 11 down to five with 5-year-old twins.
Incredible.
And those five boys in a row
Uh-huh.
can, create more heat, noise, energy, destruction, chaos in 5 minutes than any of the rest of my kids combined.
Yeah.
And I, most of the time, am okay with that within
Mm.
reason. I mean, obviously, if they're doing off limits things like throwing balls in the house that are going to break things, well,
Right.
that's a boundary. We've already said
Mhm.
that's not okay.
Mhm.
That's not boyhood. That's just disrespect.
Yeah.
So I think we need to make sure that we're making those
Yes,
distinctions.
that's
But
right.
then also, there will be days when I can't take it as well as other days. There will be days when I am genuinely overstimulated or
Mhm.
have too many things going on. And the fact that I know that this wrestling is going to turn into crying at some point. It always does. At
Yes.
some point, somebody gets punched in the nose, an elbow goes wrong. I mean, like,
Mhm.
it's going to happen. At some point, somebody is upset and losing their temper or crying or bleeding. Um, Sometimes it's in my sanity's best interest to cut it off before that happens
Sure.
and say, take it outside
Yes.
or we're done. And
Yes.
so I want moms to hear that that's even though we don't want beta males being bossed around by women, we're still their authority as their moms when they're in our home. And it's
Absolutely.
wise to establish those boundaries and keep them strong.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there again is that fine line that can be tricky to determine, is you don't want to stifle their spirit. You don't want to extinguish their drive, their initiative, that light to go out in their eyes where they're always shut down. But absolutely, if you're worn out, they should be outside anyway, right? Like just letting off that steam. I heard someone say, employ them and exhaust them. So, they need chores. And as they get bigger and older, they can handle more literal weight and responsibility. So as they grow, their chores grow, and it's so good for them. It's good for the family. So whether they're outside working or they're outside playing, they need to be outside a lot, and some good energy. Like yesterday, in between little sessions of homeschool, we do like knock out one subject or read 20 or 30 minutes and then break, and then do something else, another break. Well, one of those things we found helpful, I got this really inexpensive at Aldi spike ball, is this little net with
Mhm.
these bounce balls, and they just hit it
Yeah.
back and forth to each other. I mean, they can do that forever. I mean, just easy, simple things like that they're getting out that energy, and then they can focus better. But yeah, we don't want them, tumbling down the stairs and knocking a hole in the drywall, right? Like that's a off limits boundary right there. Yeah, kick them outside where
Right.
they're meant to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like, so I just shared on my Instagram stories the other day. I've got a kid who is not bad at academics, but he doesn't love it, which is not uncommon for boys. But he loves animals.
Mhm.
So this is going to be true of every kid, regardless of gender, but finding ways where we can combine things they love with things they must do
Mhm.
always is a win for me. So he was holding a cat while doing his math.
I
And the
love
cat was thrilled and he was thrilled.
it. That's
And the
perfect.
cat was purring and he had his right hand free to write and he was just so much more content to be there. So talk to
Brilliant.
me about ways that we can um that we can encourage our boys' interests, um, while not having them kind of go crazy with their passions, because scripture
Mhm.
speaks to that we're not supposed to be ruled by our passions,
Mhm.
while still teaching them to get things done. You touched on it with chores, but
Yeah.
like talk maybe to the parent that's like, give me something to hold on to. Give me an example of a chore or an occupation. It makes me think of there's this line in Sense and Sensibility
Mhm.
where Alan Rickman's character says, "Give me an occupation or I shall run mad." I
Yes.
always think of that with boys.
Riveting. Yeah. So my oldest is an animal lover too. So yeah, and we have a little lap dog on the inside. Outside though, if anyone hates small dogs, we have a Great Pyrenees, so it balances out.
Ooh,
He
yeah.
sometimes holds the dog while he does work, but so we do live on a little bit of land. We have farm animals, so they're working chores to that end. But because of his love of animals, that has segued in also his love of writing. So now he's writing fantasy epics about animals, with swords, kind of like Green Ember, that they're
Yeah.
looking for justice and adventure and truth. And so, yeah, we put those things together. But you don't have to live on land or have animals or have all that wide open space. For years, we lived in an apartment. We've lived in a house in the suburbs and drove to the park all the time. So, yeah, getting those boys outside, and especially I like to combine their interests with being outside and, yeah, taking a break, running around, back to reading. My younger really loves war stories. So he'll sit outside and read, hero stories of World War II or tactical campaigns. I don't know all the terms from Vietnam. And then he's flying a remote controlled
Oh, of
airplane
all things.
outside. All the things, he's telling me about. And I'm like, okay, yes. I never learned much war history in school, but I'm learning it now. So yeah, we've allowed them some time and freedom and room and space to explore those interests.
I love that. As a very specific recommendation, she mentioned Green Ember. That's a wonderful series for
Yeah.
boys and girls, but particularly boys. Rabbits with Swords.
Yes.
And then you were talking about those adventure stories. We love
Mhm.
Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales too,
Yes.
which is a graphic novel
Yep.
that addresses history in a very engaging way. I have a 9-year-old that will sit and read those for
Oh
hours.
yeah.
Um, so let's say you have the mom who has a mix of boys and girls.
Hmm.
They're not, quote, a boy mom.
Hmm.
Because I do think that people expect boy moms to understand boys better because what's your other option, right? Let's say you have a mix of boys and girls and you kind of don't feel like you're connecting super well with your boys. I know you just have boys,
Hmm.
but what would you say to a mom who's like, I just get my girls better. I kind of enjoy them more. My boys stress me out. What kind of encouragement or advice would you offer her?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I've had someone ask me that. And I feel like I came from that place because I only had a sister. I only grew up with one sibling and I wasn't around young boys much. So as they started growing, I was like, huh, what am I going to do here? But I am very blessed to have a husband that's always leading the way with them, whether it is, just playing catch in the yard or chopping firewood or learning their first firearm, things like that. I know that's a bit extreme, but I just kind of lean into what they're interested in, even if it's as simple as, okay, World War II, let's go to the library and find every book we can. And we make that an adventure, or make a blanket for, or, take them to the park with their favorite trees to climb, take enough snacks and drinks so that you can be there for hours. Go on a hiking trail with them. Even if they complain about it first, they usually always thank you afterwards because it was a new thing. It was a new
Yeah.
pathway, a new adventure together. So, yeah, even my oldest still enjoys the zoo. And then he really deep dives into researching animals. But yeah, as they're growing and learning, I'm leaning into what they're doing as well. So sports, they are in one sport. They used to do soccer. They aged out. Now they're in jujitsu. I can't really get into that, but I'm very supportive. You
Yeah.
won't see
Yeah,
me
you can cheer.
doing jujitsu, but I'm there. Yeah.
I think what you just said, those last 2 words or 3 words, "But I'm there."
Hmm.
Um, Boys really, really love having you cheer for them, even if you can't. I mean, every kid does, but I really feel like it is built into the boy DNA that
Yes.
his mom or his girl or his wife is like on his team and for him, and not this is probably the next direction we're going, not constantly criticizing or nagging
Yeah.
him. Um, that just builds up their confidence so much. And we have a world that tells us that a confident man is a dangerous thing,
Mm,
but a confident, righteous man is a
yeah.
very good thing for
Yeah.
the world.
Yes.
Um, so, talk to me about what it's like to balance being the authority in their lives,
Hmm.
because as a homeschool mom, you and I are the ones that they interact with the most. It's and my husband is also very involved, but he's also
Hmm.
working a 9 to 5, and I'm the one that's most of the face-to-face interaction during the day.
Sure.
How do we encourage that leadership, encourage that desire to provide and protect and um, forge new paths while still holding those boundaries and not nagging? Because nobody likes it, but it's particularly negative. Dorinda Wilson has a wonderful book on raising boys,
Uh-huh.
and she just passed this last fall, but she had 8 children, and I think 5 or 6 are boys.
Hmm.
So she knows wherever she speaks, and she's really good about talking to this idea of having respect for our boys.
Yes, that's what I was
Um,
gonna say. Yep, nailed it.
yeah. So expound on that, please.
Yeah, so there's also a really great book about mother and sons, that also just the heart of it is respect. And that translates to marriage, of course, the respect and love cycle. But when a boy knows that even if they're being corrected, hey, buddy, this was the standard. I asked you to do this. You have to stick to it, or just cold, hard math, black and white. This is the consequence if you don't. You're still loving them and respecting them through that. Even if they made a bad choice, you're not talking down to them, well, you always, or you never, or I can't stand how, and even being careful with your voice. This is something I personally have had to grow on. I don't want that criticalness, even if I'm choosing my words carefully. Have to run it through the Holy Spirit, right? So that my voice isn't coming out in that way that sounds like, oh, mom is just griping again, right? Because we want to build them up, and we want to take away, if possible, it's hard, the emotions out of, I asked you to do this, you didn't do it, here's what you have to do instead. So that the emotional burden is on them. But we want to maintain that respect, like you said, cheering them on, building them up, encouraging them in all the things they are doing right, all the things they are growing in. Like my oldest, I was just so taken aback by, he is learning the cajon, the drum that you sit and kind of beat for worship at church. And he stepped up to be on youth band, and it just blew me away. And I was so proud of him. But yet he still has to read the chapter book that I assigned that he doesn't want to read, the certain Diary of an American Frontier or something. So I do still have to lovingly confront him on, hey, I asked you to do that, you didn't do it, this is what you have to do now. And man, you are killing it with the youth worship team. So I'm still the same person encouraging him and cheering him on, but I'm still holding him to the standard.
I love that. Talk to me about using fewer words with boys than girls. Is this something you've
Fewer
encountered?
words. Yes, encountering that more and more. And I've even heard or read someone said you could gently just put your hand on their shoulder, especially when they're younger, like, hey, buddy, look at me a second. You don't have to force them to look at you, but sometimes it helps. And you don't need to go on a long diatribe, also been guilty of that. Fewer words.
Same,
Yeah, you're so
same.
right. You're so right. It's more about action than speaking with them. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to speak to this from a boy and a girl mom perspective, and that is that it's not straight across the board, but there is more of that desire for an emotional connection,
Mhm.
more desire for physical touch from my girls, more desire for longer conversations about whatever.
True.
But at the same time, my 19-year-old that edits this and is hearing me talk about this, and like, your tone is not always right. You often use too many words. Yeah, okay. Moms struggle. I mean, this is a hard area to pull
It
back
is.
in and to find that line. And I'm constantly repenting and trying to find a better way. But one of the things, so we have this tradition for birthdays where you go around and say what you love
Yeah.
about the person that's the birthday honoree. And for mine, my 19-year-old said, I just love talking to you. Like, I love talking about, we can talk about anything.
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, that was special to hear coming from a teenager, I mean, a young adult, a legal adult who
Yeah.
is a boy. So I don't want moms to hear that I'm writing off conversation,
Right.
but the actual communication method for boys often needs to be much more succinct and much more direct.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Absolutely. Yeah. Short, clear directions and short, clear consequences that can win the day. Yeah.
And pretty immediate ones.
Yes.
Something where it's like run a lap now,
Mm-hmm.
or you just earned yourself the ability to scrub out the sink
Yes.
now,
Yes.
so that connection is very viscerally made.
Yes.
Um,
And physical. Like the other day, I was driving home and the boys were arguing in the car. I'd had enough. I come up to the driveway. It's an uphill driveway. I say, all right, hop out. You're running up. It's a pretty steep run. So they got out, they ran the hill, and they were done arguing. It was good. And I had a few minutes of
that's
silence.
perfect. That is like the perfect all around solution, because boys really have that physical energy to expend.
Hmm.
And kind of like you were talking about at the very beginning, when you are in a system, Jordan Peterson talks about
Yeah.
the current traditional school system not being built for boys particularly because, as you say, they need those outlets,
Hmm.
but there's no recourse in the system for those outlets.
Hmm.
And then you have a almost like steam building up. I mean, you say
Yeah.
that phrase, let off steam, but you could picture boys' energy levels being like steam building up. And at a certain point, we
Yeah.
shouldn't be surprised if something explodes in some way, shape, or form if it has been constantly suppressed, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. And I remember overhearing a young mom saying that she had pulled her young son, he was probably 5 or 6, out of a private school because he was always in trouble for trying to play wrestle with other boys. And so their solution at the school was they made him stay inside at recess and do worksheets. So
Oh, goodness. Yeah, no,
great.
that's the opposite of what was
Yeah.
gonna get that energy out.
So
Yeah.
she had to pull him out and she found other options. But yeah, when you punish the very thing that, needs to be released, and yeah, it's just going to compound until there's really big problems.
Yeah, and we do see big problems. I think one of the hard conversations, or the conversations that I feel like I struggle to engage with, is the secular view of
Mhm.
manhood, boyhood, being a male, because it's impossible to dismiss the fact that we do have a lot of toxic maleness
Mhm.
going around,
Mhm.
you know? And so when I encounter that constant negativity, like in a comment section that's like, you know what, I just kind of hate men. And all the women are saying, me too, me too, me too.
Mhm.
Well, one, you have to consider the source and say you're only hearing one side of the argument. But
Mhm.
two, very likely they're not encountering a lot of good men.
Right.
And who knows if they're good women either, but they're not
Yeah.
encountering good men. And they're
Mhm.
coming away with an impression of the more negative aspects of masculinity, because just like there's negative aspects of femininity, there's negative aspects of masculinity. It's not all inherently good if we're not doing it according to God's order.
That's right.
Um, so I'm assuming you wrote this book because you wanted to direct parents on how to raise the kind of men that the comment section isn't complaining about.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, men, young men who are humble leaders, who are servants, who put others before themselves, who are strong as they physically can be, who are ready for a challenge, who take on hardship and push themselves further than they think they can go, whether it's academically, mentally, physically, spiritually, anything. Yeah, ready to go the extra mile and protect, provide, lead, and love. That's the kind of men we want. But it's so simple when they're so little and so young. It just starts with letting them play, training them respect and manners, boundaries, and discipline. But, letting them have those hours outside, bored, playing with sticks, climbing a tree, riding their bike, reading adventure stories, spending a lot of time with dad as they can, and just seeing that manhood is a good thing. And we need it. We so desperately need it for our families in America.
Absolutely, we do. You talk
Mm-hmm.
about the idea of courage and heroism and
Mm-hmm.
how that is something that boys need to have presented to them. And you've talked about reading stories of heroes. Do you have some like practical lists you could give us? You said you have a really big reader. What kinds of things are you putting in front of your sons' minds and eyes and ears so that they're hearing that heroism is not about self, but about serving?
Oh, that's good. Yeah. So, besides, well, first and foremost, scripture, right? The Bible, the kings and heroes of days past. But then as far as literature, we've got like the great illustrated classics, that old set, that series. My husband remembers reading when he was young. So he started reading that to the boys when they were as little as 3. So it's like the abridged classics: 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Three Musketeers,
Yeah.
yeah, King Arthur. And now, it stretches all the way to movies. Like, what good movies are we letting them see now that they're older? Band of Brothers and Gladiator, and showing them that, man, courage, honor, sacrifice, these are high ideals, high values. And it's a process of shaping their character by God's grace, year after year, in order to get them to that mindset of a man who's willing to lead and lead well. But some other series that come to mind, we mentioned Green Ember. There's also Wing Feather. And we're
Yeah, we love
doing,
Wing Feather.
you love Wing Feather? Oh, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a favorite. Also, right now we're reading Ranger's Apprentice. We're in like the 10th
Okay.
book of that one, by John Flanagan. Next, we're headed to Red Wall, and it's stories of
We've
a
done that one too.
heroic
Yep.
mouse. Yeah, so we're
Yep.
gonna hit
That's a
that
good
one
one.
next. And then they've read a lot on their own as well, but these are just some of the main read alouds we've done as a family.
I love that. I think what I want my audience to be getting is that you really have so much influence
Hmm.
in the shaping of your son's characters,
Yes.
in the renewing of their minds, in like mostly moms are listening.
Hmm.
And it's easy for a mom to feel helpless, not being a boy herself,
Sure.
to know how to equip her boys to be good men in the future, Lord willing. And I think what I want this podcast to do and what we're focusing on here is like, what are those practical things? And I love that you're giving all of the tips of the series that you read and the way that you talk to them and where they spend time outside
Yeah.
and the physical movement that
Yeah.
they have. This
Chores.
is just going to be such
Yeah.
a great resource.
All the
Yes,
good stuff.
chores,
Yes.
activity.
Yep. Mhm.
Mhm. I think Justin Early is one that really advocates. He wrote Habits of a Household. He really
Mhm.
advocates for chores as a structure in the home, but also as a consequence. He's
Yeah.
like, I mean, do you do that? Do you do chores as a consequence?
Absolutely. So they have just set chores, and then sometimes we have special project chores, and then yeah, there's extra chores if some boundary is passed or some agreement is broken. Absolutely, consequence chores. That's usually very unpleasant things like mucking out the barn or chopping way more firewood or lifting heavy loads. So you don't want
Yeah.
those. But it's
No, but even then, what did you say? You said something and exhaust them. What was the first word you said?
employ, so give them a
Employ.
job. Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on
Thanks.
and sharing your insights. Thank you for writing Boyhood Resurrected. Questions about books about boys is way up on my list of FAQs. And so highly recommend you go check it out. And we will put all of your info in the show notes. Where can everybody find you?
RebeccaLovell.com, and my Instagram is Mrs. Poet _actual.
Okay, awesome. Any words of wisdom you want to leave us with before we go?
Yeah, I end the book this way, and I love to just encourage people this way. I have not done everything perfect with my boys. I'm absolutely a work in progress. And I have a chapter towards the end of the book of what do you do if you feel like, well, it's too late for me and my son and our connection and our relationship, or I don't see his future's very bright. I think you can absolutely start over. Start over tomorrow. It's going to be hard. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. Take small steps to build relationship, build trust, put new boundaries, new standards in place. And I think day by day, God can and will do a miracle in your son and you and your family, all to his glory. And you can still have a young man that will live up to what God has called him to be. Absolutely, it's possible. Yeah.
I love that word of encouragement and hope, because there are a lot of moms that need some hope.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here, Rebecca. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and thank you for encouraging moms this way.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
If you enjoyed the Emma's for Mama podcast, I would be so honored if you would subscribe and follow along, maybe share with friends, or even leave a review. And if you want more content on motherhood and biblical responses to cultural issues, be sure to follow along on Instagram at m.is.for.mama.